Hello, and in this video I'm going to be talking about champions that fall off late game. By this I don't mean that they're rubbish late game, but by this I mean that compared to their early game or their mid game, there's quite a difference. For an example, Lee Sin, his early game, mid game is really good, but his late game isn't as good, but he's still quite good late game. First, we're going to be talking about Pantheon. Now, Assassin Pantheon will fall off because his early game and mid game will just absolutely devastate the enemy team. You'll literally just kill them in a few seconds. But if you go Assassin Pantheon, he falls off. His amazing early game benefits highly itemized into Glass Cannon, but building Bruiser Pantheon sacrifices his early game superiority for a mediocre Bruiser late game. If you want a late game Bruiser, many other champions do it better than Pantheon. I'm not saying Pantheon's bad late game, he's still really good. His early game and mid game are absolutely devastating, but if you don't really get any kills, his late game starts becoming lackluster. Now I'm going to be talking about Lee Sin, and he falls off because he can't get to a single target effectively if the other team is playing properly. Early and mid game he's an amazing duelist and is just awesome in small 2 or 3 person skirmishes because he can get to the target he wants to take them out. However, late game it's more difficult, and also in a single target duel or even a small skirmish, energy isn't an issue because you're generally taking advantage of your passive. But in the full-blown team fight, this can be really difficult to maximize if you're trying to attack, debuff and shield your carries all at once, which causes him to have some energy problems in team fights, which limits his damage and utility potential greatly. And he either builds damage and acts like an assassin, being able to kill the enemy carry quickly but being relatively squishy, or he builds tanky, sacrificing damage, and protects his own ADC with his utility. I'm going to be talking about Renekton now, and because he's an AD caster, people think that they should compare him to AD bruisers. By itemization, AD casters tend to fall off a bit late game, but by ratios, it isn't like Renekton as bad as AD casters go late game. And for example, Riven is really good about late game scaling because of defensive AD scaling on top of good ratios. And Renekton needs to build tanky to survive team fights, and in doing so must build a few more tanky items than other bruisers. This means he does not do the same damage as other bruisers, which means that he falls off late game. He has a role in protecting his ranged or AP carry late game, but finds this hard to do because unless you can get fully built, you can almost be ignored due to low damage, mainly from a weak passive. And if his passive could let him generate Furor more quickly or more efficiently, then he'll definitely be a lot better late game. Okay, now let's take a look at Shaco. I've played a bit of Shaco and I will say that he isn't that useful in the late game, but he still can burst really hard. Now, he can fall off extremely fast when he doesn't kill in lanes, and this will slow down his jungle and he will only have 2 to 3 items. Normally a good Shaco player will always build him similar to an AD carry like Ezreal or Corki, and in a good game he's about 3000 gold behind the AD carry. So he's a really squishy melee AD carry, but he's got quite a few defensive spells for team fights. A good Shaco will use these more defensively than offensively when he's behind of XP or gold. Now, think about him as an ADC that can double his damage, which makes him do that damage late game. You run into the team fight and have at least R or Q, which is your clone or your the ability to make you invisible, ready as a defensive spell. With your ult, you dodge stuns and tons of burst, or use it to break cages. You can confuse the enemy and maybe run out from the team fight. The Q is just a free flash or focus. The bad point is that you need someone to initiate, and often you have to initiate as a squishy Shaco, but you can make the fight extremely fast to a 4v5. Focus one of the damage dealers in the enemy team and get him down in about 2 seconds. You can use a part of your skill to disappear, such as your ult or your Q, and you can come back and then kill another. Now, the reason why Shaco's bad in the late game is because if you failed your early and mid game when you haven't got super fed, Shaco can't really tank. A Maokai or Udyr can tank even if they did really badly during the early game. So Shaco is a champ that can decide the game at the first 5 minutes. Next, I'm going to be talking about LeBlanc. Now, from this, I'm not saying that she falls off damage-wise late game. What I'm trying to say is that if the enemy team pushes with 5, it becomes difficult for LeBlanc to get a combo off on someone, especially someone that matters, such as the AD carry. A good player can still position themselves quite well, possibly come from an unexpected direction and get a kill. But if the enemy team is equally good, it's going to be quite hard. You can still contribute to the team, but if you drop a distortion for AoE damage, not really a good idea, and happen to get hit by a stun or something before you get to back out, you're going to get exploded instantly. With good warding, she still does a lot of damage and can impact the game quite a bit. You just can't fall behind as a team. Once the opponent gets your lanes pushed and just ram use 5, LeBlanc has less presence than a lot of other ADs. If you can roam and pick someone off in their jungle, thanks to good warding, which in turn is thanks to not being monstrously behind, which is quite huge, and you probably can do that unless their team builds a lot of magic resist. Now, she does do ridiculous things such as just a ton of damage, and she can burst people quite easily, and when you DFG them, they can also just literally get 2 or 3 shot. And now, a lot of whether or not champions are good is based on pro/tournament use. LeBlanc may be weaker in play with a high level of teamwork, keeping track of where she is,